universalism becomes even more important in hard times. More people are suddenly aware that they're at risk, their family's at risk, somebody may be unemployed, their child, their grandchild may not get a job. Bad things happen, accidents happen. And universalism is there to say to everybody, there is a social security system, there is a safety net there that will rescue you, whatever life's problems may be. And I think that as we see the health service beginning to be really taken apart and dismantled and fragmented, people become very worried about that. I think as they see increasingly social care becoming less and less of it, more and more threadbare, and the state doesn't really provide social care, and if you do have money yourself or a property, you're going to lose it all if you're one of the unlucky ones that has to go into residential care. I think people increasingly say, well, hang on, that's not fair. Shouldn't we be pooling the risk so that people who are lucky enough to die without needing lots of care and people who are unlucky enough to have very expensive care have their risk pooled together in an insurance system? Well, you know, that's what the state is. It is a national insurance system for everybody. And I think as people see others being hit hard, they recognise that. Certainly most people think that care is free until they get there, and then they're very shocked to find that they can lose everything, their home and everything. And I think that shows how much of an instinct there is for that there should be a universal welfare system. Well, what's viable is how much care we can afford, whoever pays for it. How much health, how much care. What's plain is that it's actually cheaper if we pool the risk and pay together. The broadest shoulders pay the highest cost, but nobody is destroyed by getting sick or getting old. And in a sense, how much of all of that we want? Well, how high do we want our taxes to be? If you say, well, let everybody pay privately, as in America, everybody ends up paying a lot more. Some people get nothing, and even the well-off suddenly find they can be ruined by a sickness if there isn't an NHS there. So I think the question is, how high taxes are we willing to pay for how high a standard? And the idea we all go off and pay out of our own pockets is not really the British way or British attitude towards these very fundamental questions. Mostly this argument is around fripperies, you know, a little bit of winter fuel allowance or a bus pass. Those are the small issues that are not really very important. The big issues are pensions and health and care. And on those, I think people are pretty united. There will always be disagreements. There is a left and there is a right. The necessity of democracy is that there should be that tension. We pull too far one way, then we'll go back the other way for a little bit. You find that people feel after a Labour Party's been in power for a while, they think, oh, these benefits are getting a bit too generous. We need to cut them back. People are getting away with it. There are lots of cheats and frauds and scroungers. Then you have a Conservative Party in power for a while, and they say, this is awfully mean, look how much people are suffering, we really ought to be a bit more generous. And so you get this sort of pendulum swing. British social attitudes has monitored people's attitudes, and they do change very much. And finding the happy medium is always the problem. But essentially, we are a social democratic country. We're very worried about being cheated, about anybody who's defrauding the system, but sometimes that can become an obsession. We know that the amount of fraud is very small compared, for instance, with the number of people who don't claim the benefits they're entitled to. So it's a question of balance. And very often at the moment we seem to have government by anecdote. You tell a horror story about a foreign family living in a mansion in Kensington with 20 children being paid £100,000 housing benefit. Everybody says, oh, let's do away with housing benefit. And then suddenly you see the effect of what happens to ordinary families struggling and the hardship that these cuts can cause, and people swing back the other way. I think social care is going to be a big question at the next election. Labour sort of got there at the very end. Not much use. They'd had 13 years and they didn't solve the problem, nor had the governments before. I have covered, since the 1970s, so many government reports from all parties on what do we do about social care. Very sensible solutions put forward, nothing done. And we've just had another one now. I think that we're reaching such a crisis in care because the cuts have made it so much worse, because local authorities really can't afford to pay any more towards social care. I think this is going to be regarded as a crisis by the next election. And the party that comes up with the most convincing answer and says they'll actually do it rather than talk about it stands a good chance. But it will take honesty. Yeah, somebody's got to pay. Either you pay personally, privately, and it might completely bust your family, or we pay for this collectively. Which is it to be?